The morning Dale Hutchins decided to beg was the same morning he found his last chicken dead in the yard. It was lying on its side near the rusted water trough, feathers dull and stiff, one yellow eye still half open, as if it had died mid-thought. Dale stood over it for a long moment, his worn boots sinking slightly into the dry red clay, and he didn't feel sadness so much as a strange, hollow confirmation, like the world was simply finishing what it had started 3 years ago. He picked up the chicken, carried it to the edge of the property where the fence post leaned at a permanent angle, and set it down in the dry grass. He didn't have the energy to bury it. He barely had the energy to stand. The Tennessee sky was already white with heat at 7 in the morning, the kind of flat, relentless brightness that offered no comfort. The hills in the distance, rolling green in good years, brown and cracked in bad ones, sat motionless under the glare. His 42 acres stretched out around him, fallow fields, a sagging barn, a vegetable garden reduced to 3 rows of stubborn collard greens, and 1 tomato plant that had somehow survived on stubbornness alone. Dale was 52 years old, and he looked 65. His face was the face of a man who had spent decades outdoors, weathered to a permanent redness, deeply lined around the eyes and mouth. His hands were enormous, thick-fingered, calloused, permanently stained at the knuckles with the kind of dirt that no amount of soap fully removed. He stood 6 feet tall but carried himself with a slight forward hunch, like a man who had spent too many years leaning into wind. He went back inside the house. The kitchen smelled of coffee and something medicinal, the particular combination that had defined his home for the past 14 months. His wife, Carol Hutchins, was already up, sitting at the kitchen table in her housecoat, her hands wrapped around a mug. She was 48 and had the careful, deliberate movements of someone who managed pain quietly. The rheumatoid arthritis had spread from her hands to her hips over the past year, and some mornings she couldn't grip a coffee mug without wincing. She didn't wince now. She watched him come in and read his face the way only someone who had been married to a person for 26 years can read a face completely and without asking unnecessary questions. "The Henderson seed supplier?" she asked. "Called yesterday. Price went up again. I don't have it." Dale poured himself coffee and stood at the counter, not sitting. Sitting felt too much like giving up, not even close. Carol was quiet for a moment. Outside, a screen door somewhere down the road banged in the faint morning wind. "The bank?" she said, though she already knew the answer to that too. Patricia Lowe called Thursday. "We're 90 days behind on the operating loan." She was apologetic about it. He almost smiled, but not quite. She said apologetic. Carol set her mug down. "Dale, I know. You need to go talk to Randolph Mercer." The name sat in the kitchen like something physical. Dale turned his coffee mug in his hands, looking down at it. Randolph Mercer owned 1,100 acres in Caldwell County, Tennessee. He owned the grain storage facility on Route 7, a share of the local equipment rental company, and, most relevantly, the largest seed operation in the region, Mercer Agricultural Supply, which his father had built in the 1970s, and which Randolph had expanded into a regional force over the past 30 years. He was 61 years old, had been mentioned twice in Tennessee Farm and Agriculture Monthly, and drove a black Ford F350 that was always clean regardless of how much he'd been working. Dale had spoken to the man exactly 4 times in his life. 3 of those times were at the county agricultural fair. The 4th was at a funeral 12 years ago, where they'd nodded at each other across the parking lot. "I'm not going to that man with my hat in my hand," Dale said. "Your hat's already in your hand," Carol said quietly. "It's been in your hand since March. The only question is who you show it to." Dale didn't answer. He finished his coffee standing up, rinsed the mug, and set it in the rack with the same deliberate care he brought to everything, even now, even when everything was falling. He thought about the fields. About the 42 acres his father, Glenn Hutchins, had purchased in 1974 after 17 years of saving, working first as a hired hand on other people's land and then as a mechanic on the side to supplement. Glenn Hutchins had cried the day he signed the deed. Dale had heard the story so many times it lived in him like a memory of his own, though he'd been only 2 years old at the time. The land meant something that went beyond economics. It meant a man had looked at the world and found a place in it that was his. Dale was not going to lose it over seeds. He changed his shirt. The drive to Mercer's property took 23 minutes on county roads that wound through the hills in long, lazy curves. Dale drove his 2009 Chevy pickup, which had 187,000 miles on it and a driver's side window that only rolled down 3/4 of the way. He kept the radio off. He needed to think. He had rehearsed what he would say. He would be direct. He would not be pathetic. He would explain the situation, the drought, the failed soybean crop in 23, the corn that had barely broken even in 24, the complete loss in 25 when the late spring frost followed by 2 months of near-zero rainfall had killed everything before it had a chance. He would explain that he wasn't asking for money, wasn't asking for credit, wasn't asking for anything that cost Mercer anything real. He was asking for seeds, specifically, and this was the part that had taken him 2 weeks to bring himself to say out loud, the part that made him feel something he hadn't felt since he was a child. He was asking for culled seeds, rejected inventory, the batches that didn't meet the germination rate standards for commercial sale, the ones Mercer's operation either composted or disposed of, rotten seeds effectively, substandard, throwaway. He was going to ask the most powerful farmer in Caldwell County for his garbage. Dale gripped the steering wheel and told himself this was not humiliation. This was farming. Farming was the act of finding possibility in what looked impossible, planting in drought, building in flood, starting over after fire. He was just applying that same logic to his current situation. He almost believed himself. Mercer's property announced itself before you reached the gate. The fields on either side of Canby Road were immaculate, soybeans in precise rows, the soil dark and well turned, an irrigation system visible in the distance, its aluminum pipes catching the morning light. A red barn the size of a small warehouse stood near the road, freshly painted. The fencing was new cedar, evenly spaced, not a post leaning. The gate was a simple iron affair, not locked, with a mailbox beside it that read Mercer 114 Canby Road in neat black letters. Dale pulled through and drove up the gravel road to the main house, a wide one-story brick structure with a covered porch that ran its full width, an American flag on a pole near the front walk, 2 large oak trees providing shade over the east side of the house, a garden along the south wall that was clearly maintained with serious attention. He parked, got out, and stood beside his truck for a moment. A man came around the side of the house. Not Mercer, younger, mid-30s, wearing work clothes and carrying a clipboard. He stopped when he saw Dale. "Help you?" he said, not unfriendly, just direct. "I'm looking for Randolph Mercer. My name's Dale Hutchins. I farm over on Sycamore Ridge Road. I don't have an appointment. I was hoping he might have a few minutes." The young man, who turned out to be Kyle Braddock, Mercer's farm manager, looked at Dale for a moment with the assessing gaze of someone who spent his days evaluating things. Soil, equipment, weather, people. "He's in the equipment barn. I'll let him know you're here." Dale waited beside his truck. He looked out over the fields and felt the particular mix of admiration and grief that a struggling farmer feels, looking at land that is being managed well. There was no resentment in it, or he tried to keep the resentment out of it. This was what good farming looked like: consistent investment, proper irrigation, healthy soil. This was what his land had looked like in good years. He heard boots on gravel and turned. Randolph Mercer was shorter than Dale expected, or perhaps it was that his reputation made you expect a larger man. He was perhaps 5'11", lean with the compact, efficient build of someone who had worked physically his whole life, and whose body had settled into its permanent, useful form. His hair was gray, cut short, and he wore a khaki work shirt tucked into jeans. both clean despite what Kyle had said about the equipment barn. He had sharp gray eyes and a face that didn't waste expressions. He walked up to Dale and extended his hand. "Dale Hutchins," he said. "I know the name. You're Glenn's boy." Dale shook his hand. "Yes, sir. Glenn was a good farmer." Mercer said it simply, as a fact, and then waited. Dale had rehearsed this. He had it ordered and organized in his mind. He opened his mouth and said, "Mr. Mercer, I'm in a bad spot. 3 years of losses, operating loan in default, and I've got 42 acres that could still produce if I can get them planted. I can't afford to buy seed this season. I can't get credit at the co-op or through the bank. I know it's an unusual ask, and I know it's not how business works." He stopped, took a breath. "I was wondering if you had any cold inventory, rejected seed lots, anything that didn't meet your germination standards that you'd be composting or discarding. I'm not looking for charity. I'm looking for a chance. Give me just one rotten seed, just something you were going to throw away, and I'll do the rest." He stopped talking. Mercer was watching him with those gray eyes. His expression hadn't changed. The silence lasted long enough that Dale heard a red-tailed hawk crying somewhere over the fields. "Come inside," Mercer said. The kitchen of Randolph Mercer's house was large and practical, not fancy, but serious. A long oak table, 6 chairs, a window over the sink that looked out over the back fields, a coffee maker on the counter, a bulletin board on the wall covered in papers, maps, and printouts. Mercer poured 2 cups of coffee without asking and set one in front of Dale. He sat across from him. "Tell me about the 42 acres, he said. "Soil type, what you been running?" It was not the conversation Dale had expected. He answered. They talked for 40 minutes. By the end, Dale had described his land in more detail than he'd described it to anyone in years. The sandy loam sections on the east end, the heavier clay soil near the creek, the drainage problem in the low field that had gotten worse since 21, the way the north-facing slope stayed cooler and held moisture longer. He talked about the crops he'd run, the rotations he'd used, the experiments he'd tried. Mercer listened. He asked precise questions. He was not warm exactly, but he was present. Fully present in a way that felt significant. When Dale finished, Mercer was quiet for a moment. "I'll tell you what I have," he said. "I've got 3 lots of soybean seed that failed final germination testing, came in at 61, 58, and 63%. Commercial standard is 85. I was going to compost them end of the week." He paused. "You plant those in your better soil, the loam sections, with proper spacing adjustments for the germination rate. You might get a crop." Dale's heart was doing something uncomfortable in his chest. "There's something else," Mercer said, and here his voice shifted just slightly, but enough. He looked at his coffee cup, then back at Dale. "Your father, Glenn, he did something for my family a long time ago, before you were old enough to remember it. I've been thinking about that for a while." Dale stared at him. "What did he do?" Mercer shook his head slowly. "That's a longer conversation, and I want to have it." He stood up, which meant the meeting was over. "You'll have the seed delivered to your farm tomorrow morning. 3 lots, labels included, so you know what you're working with. No charge." Dale stood. He felt strange, simultaneously lighter and heavier, like a pressure had lifted from his chest and something new and uncertain had settled in its place. "I don't know how to thank you," he said. Mercer looked at him steadily. "Plant 'em right. That's all the thanks I need right now." As Dale drove home down Canby Road, the white sky had softened to a pale blue. Somewhere in the fields to his left, the irrigation system had come on, and the air carried a brief, fine mist across the road. He didn't know what his father had done for Randolph Mercer 30 years ago. He didn't know what the seed would do in his exhausted soil. But for the first time in 3 years, Dale Hutchins drove home thinking about spring. The seed arrived at 7:15 the next morning in a white flatbed truck driven by Kyle Braddock and a young worker Dale didn't know. 3 large bags per lot, 9 bags total, each labeled with lot numbers and the germination test results exactly as Mercer had described. Dale and his son, Marcus Hutchins, helped unload them into the barn. Marcus was 24, back home for the past 8 months after spending 2 years in Nashville trying to build something in the construction trades. The Nashville plan hadn't worked out, not dramatically. Nothing Marcus wanted to talk about in detail, and he'd come home in October looking thinner than Dale remembered, and quieter than he'd been since high school. He worked without complaint, which was something, but there was a quality to his silence that troubled Dale. It was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of a young man who hadn't figured out yet what he was angry at. "Mercer's seed?" Marcus asked, reading one of the labels. "Culled lots. Won't perform like standard seed, but it's what we've got." Marcus was quiet for a moment, stacking the bags. "He just gave it to you?" "He did." Another pause. "Why?" "He said he knew your grandfather. Said Glenn did something for his family." Dale straightened up and looked at his son. "I'm going to find out what that was." Marcus looked at him with an expression Dale couldn't quite read, something between curiosity and skepticism. The default mode of a 24-year-old who had been disappointed enough times to keep his reactions close to his chest. "Okay," Marcus said, and went back to stacking bags. Carol's sister, Donna Pruitt, came by that afternoon. She was 53, a retired school librarian who had spent 30 years in the Caldwell County school system and knew, as a result, approximately everyone and everything about everyone in the county. She arrived with a casserole she claimed was leftover, but which Dale knew she had made specifically, because Donna had been making specific casseroles and calling them leftover for as long as he'd known her. She sat at the kitchen table with Carol while Dale worked outside, but he could hear them through the open window. "Randolph Mercer gave Dale seed," Donna said. "That's right," Carol said. A pause that contained an entire conversation's worth of processing. "That is not a thing Randolph Mercer does," Donna said. "I want you to know I am not aware of any precedent for that. He said he knew Glenn. Everybody knew Glenn." Another pause, but not enough to give away seed lots. Dale stopped what he was doing near the window, holding a handful of tools he'd been sorting, listening. "He said Glenn did something for his family," Carol said, before Dale was old enough to remember. Donna's voice dropped slightly in the way voices do when they're shifting from conversation into memory. "Glenn Hutchins and Robert Mercer, that was Randolph's father. They were not close men, not enemies, but not friends. There was something between them, some kind of distance. I always assumed it was just competition, you know, the way farmers in the same county can be." She was quiet for a moment, but there was a year, I think it was 1971, maybe 1972, when things were bad for Robert Mercer. I was just a girl. I don't remember the details, but I remember my mother talking about it. The Mercers almost lost everything that year. Dale's hands had gone still, and they didn't, Carol said. "No, they didn't." Donna picked up her fork. "I don't know more than that. But I know Glenn was involved somehow. I remember my mother saying his name in that context." A pause. "Your mother-in-law would know. If anyone would know, it's Beverly Hutchins." Dale called his mother that evening from the porch. Beverly Hutchins was 79, still living in the original farmhouse in neighboring Baxter County where Glenn had grown up, a 2-hour drive east. Her mind was clear as well water, sharper than Dale's in many ways, though her body had been giving her trouble for the past few years. She answered on the second ring. "Dale." Her voice still had the quality it had always had, warm and direct, no wasted words. "Everything all right?" "I need to ask you something about Dad." He told her about the visit to Mercer, got about the seed, about what Randolph had said. The silence on the other end of the line was long enough that Dale checked to make sure the call hadn't dropped. "Mom, I heard you." Her voice had changed, not colder, but more careful. I wondered if that would come back around someday. "What happened?" Beverly was quiet for another moment. When she spoke, it was in the measured way of someone choosing to tell a truth they had held for a long time. "It was 1972. Your father was 30 years old." We'd been farming the Sycamore Ridge land for going on 5 years. We had you, just barely. You were born in the spring of that year. A breath. Robert Mercer, Randolph's daddy, came to your father in September of 1972 with a problem. A serious problem. The kind of problem that could have destroyed the Mercer family entirely. What kind of problem? Financial. And worse than financial. She paused. Robert had co-signed a loan for his brother. Your father knew his brother slightly, not well, and the brother had gotten himself into serious legal trouble, not just debt, criminal trouble, connected to some of the people behind a land fraud scheme that was going through the county at the time. There were going to be investigations. Robert stood to lose the land, the business, everything, not because he'd done anything wrong himself, but because of what his name was attached to through that loan. Dale was leaning forward on the porch railing, looking out at the dark fields. Your father had documentation, Beverly continued. He had records, I don't even know exactly how. It involved a man he'd done some bookkeeping work for years before. Records that could show clearly that Robert Mercer's involvement was secondary, that he was a co-signer who hadn't known the full nature of what the loan was for. That documentation was the difference between Robert Mercer losing everything and Robert Mercer being cleared. Dad gave it to him. He did, freely. No payment, no agreement, no expectation of anything in return. Dale closed his eyes for a moment. Why are you only telling me this now? Because your father never wanted it told. He said it wasn't a favor that needed remembering. He said Robert was a good farmer, and a good farmer shouldn't lose his land over his brother's mistakes. A pause. He made me promise not to tell you until you were old enough that telling you wouldn't make you think he was asking for something back. Dale sat with that for a long time. He never told Randolph, Beverly said. I don't know how much Randolph knows. Robert may have told him, or Robert may have told him only part of it. But whatever he told him, it was enough. After he hung up, Dale sat on the porch until full dark, listening to the field crickets start up in the grass at the fence line. The night was warm, and the stars were out, the sharp, uncomplicated stars of rural Tennessee that you could only see properly this far from any city. He thought about his father giving away documentation that could save a man's family, and asking nothing in return, and then going back to his 42 acres and planting them again the next morning. He thought about Randolph Mercer carrying that for 50 years. He thought about seeds, how something your grandfather planted could take 50 years to come up. 3 days later, Dale ran into Preston Lyle at the feed store in town. Preston Lyle was 56, owned about 200 acres of good bottomland east of town, and was the kind of man who always seemed to know what was happening in the county before anyone else did. He was also, Dale had always thought, subtly competitive in the way of men who need to know they're doing better than their neighbors. Heard you were out at Mercer's place, Preston said, loading his truck with bags of fertilizer. Dale kept his expression neutral. Small towns paid him a visit. What for, if you don't mind me asking? Agricultural business. Preston smiled, the smile of someone who knows more than he's letting on. He's doing something different this year, Mercer is. You hear about the co-op proposal? No, he's putting together some kind of cooperative arrangement for the smaller farms in the western part of the county. Shared equipment, group purchasing on inputs, that kind of thing. Been talking to 6 or 7 of the smaller operators. Preston looked at him sideways. Your name's been mentioned, I hear. Dale said nothing for a moment. Where are you hearing this? Oh, you know how it is. Preston shrugged with the elaborate casualness of someone who has been practicing elaborate casualness his whole life. County's a small place. He finished loading and closed his tailgate. Just thought you'd want to know what you might be getting into. Mercer doesn't do anything that doesn't benefit Mercer. You'd do well to remember that. He drove off. Dale stood in the parking lot of the feed store and felt the particular unsettledness of a man who has been given advice he didn't ask for by someone who has reasons for giving it that he doesn't fully understand. That night, Marcus found him in the barn going through the seedlot documentation. What are you reading? Dale explained what his mother had told him. He watched Marcus's face as he told it, watched the skepticism give way to something more complicated, something that looked like the beginning of a reassessment. "So Mercer's family owes our family," Marcus said. "That's not how your grandfather looked at it, but that's what it is. What it is and how you carry it are different things," Dale said. "Your grandfather understood that." Marcus leaned against the barn door and looked out at the dark. After a moment, he said, "I want to help with the planting." It was the first time he'd offered anything directly in 8 months. "I know the germination rates are low," Marcus continued. "I was reading about compensation seeding, increasing seed density to account for lower viability. I think we can make it work on the loam sections." Dale looked at his son, really looked at him, at the face that was Carol's forehead and his own jaw, at the eyes that were entirely Marcus's own, at the hands that were just starting to look like a farmer's hands. "Yeah," Dale said, "we can make it work." They planted in the 3rd week of April. It took 6 days, Dale and Marcus working from first light to last, Carol driving the water out to them at noon, and sitting with them in the shade of the truck for 20 minutes before going back to the house. The work was methodical and exhausting, and, in the way that physical work can sometimes be, clarifying. Dale's body remembered what his mind had been trying to forget, that he was a farmer, that this was the thing he knew how to do. Marcus worked well. Better than well, he worked with a precision and patience that surprised Dale, who had expected his son's long absence from the land to show in his technique. Instead, Marcus operated the planter with careful attention, adjusted seed density correctly for each soil section, and spotted a drainage issue in the lower field that Dale had been meaning to address for 2 years and somehow never had. "If we put in a tile drain here," Marcus said, crouching at the low point of the field and pressing his fingers into the wet soil, "maybe 40 feet of it, it would stop this section from pooling every wet spring. You'd get another 6-7 acres of reliable ground." Dale crouched beside him. "You been thinking about drainage?" "I've been thinking about this farm," Marcus said simply, and that was all he said about it. On the 5th day of planting, Randolph Mercer drove up the road and parked at the field edge. He didn't get out of his truck for a few minutes, just sat there watching. Then he got out and walked over to where Dale was working. They talked for 20 minutes at the field's edge while Marcus kept working in the distance. Mercer confirmed what Preston Lyle had told Dale about the cooperative proposal. He was direct about it. He laid out the structure, the terms, the expectations. "I'm talking to 7 small operation farmers in the western county," Mercer said. "The pitch is simple: shared equipment access, group purchasing power on seed and inputs, shared storage at my facility at cost. In return, I want first right of refusal on grain from any participating farm. Not locked pricing, market rate, but my right of first refusal." Dale looked at him. "That's a significant concession from the smaller farms." "It is. I won't pretend otherwise." Mercer was looking out at the field. "But the math works. You want me to show you the numbers? I'll show you the numbers. Why are you doing this?" Mercer was quiet for a moment. "My father told me, before he died, what Glenn did for him in 1972. He told me that Glenn Hutchins was the most decent man he'd ever encountered in business, and that the reason the Mercer operation existed as it did was partly because of what your father had done." He paused. "I've been in this county 60 years. I've watched the small farms die one by one. I know the economics as well as anyone." He turned and looked directly at Dale. "I'm 61 years old and I don't have children. What I have is 1,100 acres and an operation that runs well, and I've been asking myself what I want that to mean when I'm gone." Dale absorbed this. "I'm not offering charity," Mercer said. "The cooperative has to work economically or it doesn't work. But I think it can work, and you want me to be part of it. I want you to be the first to say yes. Because if Dale Hutchins says yes, the others will come." Dale didn't say yes that day. He said he needed to think. What he didn't tell Mercer, what he came home and told Carol and Marcus that evening, was that Preston Lyle's warning had been sitting in him uneasily since the feed store parking lot. Preston Lyle said Mercer doesn't do anything that doesn't benefit Mercer, Marcus said. That's probably true, Dale said. Most things are true of most people, but the term sounds reasonable, Carol said. She had the documents spread out on the kitchen table. Mercer had given Dale a printed summary of the proposal. Her reading glasses were on, and she was going through it with the careful focus she brought to everything that required clear thinking. The first refusal clause is the key, Dale said. If he can't offer market rate, we can sell elsewhere. That's in writing. Then what's the risk? Marcus asked. Dale thought about it. Dependence. Once you're in a cooperative structure with someone who has 1,100 acres and you have 42, there's an asymmetry that doesn't go away. Even if every term is fair on paper, that asymmetry exists whether we're in the cooperative or not, Carol said quietly. She looked up from the documents. Dale, we have 9 bags of cold seed in our barn that we couldn't have purchased. We have a farm that isn't planted yet or wouldn't be. The asymmetry is already real. The room was quiet. The question isn't whether there's risk, she continued. The question is what the risk of not is. 2 weeks after planting, Dale drove over to see Howard Finch, one of the other farmers Mercer had approached about the cooperative. Howard Finch was 63, had been farming the same bottomland property his whole life. It was constitutionally suspicious of anything that involved contracts, institutions, or men who drove clean trucks. He was also one of the most skilled farmers in the county and had opinions about everything that he delivered without pausing for breath. I don't trust it, Howard said. They were standing on Howard's porch looking out at his corn, which was coming in magnificently. Howard had managed to secure seed through a cousin in Kentucky and had planted 3 weeks ahead of Dale. Mercer's always wanted access to the Western County storage market. This cooperative is how he gets it. Maybe, Dale said. But does that mean the terms aren't workable? I didn't say the terms weren't workable. I said I don't trust it. Howard was quiet for a moment, chewing on something. He was always chewing on something. A man who needed his mouth occupied when his brain was working. What I trust is that Randolph Mercer sees further down the road than I do. And I don't like not being able to see what he sees. What if what he sees is something that's good for both of you? Howard looked at him sideways. When has that ever been the default? Dale didn't have an answer for that. But on the drive home, handing over documents that could save a family he didn't owe anything to, not because he could see down the road to how it would come back, but because it was the right thing to hold in his hands at that moment. Maybe that was the thing about seeing further. Maybe you didn't need to see all the way to the end. Maybe you just needed to see clearly what was in front of you and trust that the rest would follow. On a Tuesday morning in early May, Dale's field revealed something unexpected. He was walking the rows, a habit he'd inherited from his father, who had walked his rows every morning without exception, when he stopped at the edge of the east section and stared. The culled seed was germinating. Not uniformly, there were gaps, as you'd expect from a 60% germination rate, but in the places where it was coming up strong. The soybean seedlings in the sandy loam section were showing the bright, specific green of healthy early growth, small paired leaves sharp against the dark soil. He stood there for a long time. It was not a miracle. He knew that. He was a farmer, and farmers do not believe in miracles so much as they believe in conditions. The right soil, the right moisture, the right timing. He had adjusted his seeding density to account for the lower germination rate, had selected the better draining sections for these lots, had timed the planting to a soil temperature window he'd tracked carefully. But there was still something in him that responded to the sight of something growing in a field that had been dead for 3 years. Something that was not quite the same as relief, and not quite the same as hope, but was somewhere in the specific emotional geography between them. He took out his phone and called Marcus. "Come out to the east section," he said. "Bring your mother if she's up to it." Marcus showed up 15 minutes later with Carol, who walked with her careful, deliberate gait down the field road in her good boots, squinting in the morning light. She stopped beside Dale and looked at the seedlings. She didn't say anything. She reached out and took his hand. That afternoon, Preston Lyle called. "I hear your seed came in," he said. Dale measured his response. "Looks like Mercer seed?" "That's right." A pause on the line that Dale was learning to read. It was the pause of a man who is reorganizing his approach. "You think carefully before you get into bed with Randolph Mercer," Preston said. "There are things about that man you don't know." "What things?" "Things that'll come out." "I'll just say that. If you have something specific to tell me, I'm willing to listen. If you've got general warnings without specifics, I've heard them." Another pause, shorter this time. "You'll hear more soon enough." He hung up. The thing about Preston Lyle, Dale would understand later, was that he wasn't entirely wrong. He was motivated by the wrong things, by competition, by a long-standing friction with Mercer that went back to a disputed property line in 2009, and a business disagreement that had apparently never been fully resolved. But the thing he was pointing at was real. It came out on a Thursday in late May at the County Agricultural Extension Office, where Dale had gone for a routine consultation with Carl Whitmore, the extension agent, about soil testing. Carl, 41, careful. The kind of man who chose his words the way a watchmaker chooses components, mentioned, almost in passing, that there had been some county planning discussions about the Western Corridor land. "What kind of discussions?" Dale asked. Carl looked at his desk for a moment. "I probably shouldn't be the one telling you this, but you're going to hear it one way or another." He looked up. "There's a commercial agricultural development proposal going through the county planning board. A large-scale vegetable operation, corporate out of Nashville, that's been looking at land in the Western Corridor. They've been in quiet conversations with some of the larger landholders about potential land acquisition." Dale was very still. "Mercer," he said. "I don't know the specifics of who's been talking to who," Carl said carefully. "I just know that the Western Corridor, the area where most of the small farms are, including yours, is in the zone of interest." Dale drove home thinking. He thought hard. He tried to be fair about it. The cooperative proposal, as Mercer had presented it, didn't require him to sell land. Nothing in the documents he'd reviewed said anything about land transfer. The first refusal clause on grain was not the same as an option on property. But he thought about what Howard Finch had said. Mercer sees further down the road than I do. He thought about what it would mean to be in a cooperative arrangement, dependent on shared equipment, shared storage. At the moment, a corporate buyer came into the area. A farmer who couldn't operate independently, who was reliant on Mercer's infrastructure, was a farmer who had fewer options. He thought about his father, about 42 acres, about what the land meant. He went back to Mercer's property on a Friday morning without calling ahead. Mercer was on the porch when Dale pulled up, drinking coffee and going through what looked like financial reports. He looked up without surprise, as if he'd expected this visit. "Sit down," Mercer said. Dale sat. "You heard about the development proposal," Mercer said. "Not a question." "I did. I figured you would." Mercer set his papers down. "I should have told you myself. That was a mistake on my part." Dale looked at him. "Were you talking to them? The Nashville company?" Mercer was quiet for a moment. It was the particular quiet of a man who is deciding how much of the truth serves the situation. "Yes," he said. "Last fall. Before I approached any of the small farmers about the cooperative, the air on the porch felt different. I was approached by their acquisition team," Mercer continued. "They wanted to know if I'd be interested in selling or in facilitating introductions to smaller landowners in the area. I listened, I thought about it, and I said no." He looked directly at Dale. "But I understand why that's not enough for you, given the sequence of events." Dale leaned back in his chair and looked at the fields, at the dark soil, the even rows, the irrigation pipes, at the work of 30 years made visible. If you'd said yes to them, Dale said slowly, or if you say yes to them later. The cooperative would have served as a way to bring the small farms into a dependent position before the sale. That's the thing you're afraid of, wouldn't you be? Yes, Mercer said simply. I would. He picked up his coffee mug, held it, didn't drink. The reason I said no to them was not entirely clean. Part of it was what I told you about what I want this operation to mean. Part of it was simpler than that. He paused. I grew up on this land. My father grew up on this land. The Nashville company would have converted it to a hydroponic facility and corporate contract growing within 5 years. The family farms in the western corridor would be gone. The kind of farming my father did, your father did, would be gone. And the cooperative? The cooperative keeps the small farms viable, competitive, hard to acquire. He looked at Dale. A group of farmers operating cooperatively, with shared infrastructure and group purchasing power, is a much less attractive acquisition target than 6 individual struggling operations. He paused again. The cooperative is not a trap. It's the opposite of a trap. Dale sat with this. I should have been completely transparent with you from the beginning, Mercer said. I wasn't. I told myself the Nashville conversation was irrelevant because I'd already decided. But you deserved it to know anyway. Yes, Dale said, I did. That evening, Dale sat with Carol and Marcus at the kitchen table and laid out everything. He told them about the Nashville company, about Mercer's conversation with them, about what Carl Whitmore had said, about what Mercer had told him that morning. He told it straight, without editorial, the way his father had always presented hard information to his mother, completely, and trusting the other person to handle it. When he finished, Marcus said, so we can't trust him. I think we can, Carol said, and both men looked at her. He told you the truth when he didn't have to, she said to Dale. When you confronted him directly, he didn't make excuses. He said he was wrong not to tell you earlier. He still had the conversation with the Nashville company, Marcus said, and then he said no, and then he came up with an alternative. Carol looked at her son. Marcus, you're 24. You've made decisions and said no to the worse option and done the better thing after. She paused. Does that make you untrustworthy? Marcus was quiet. The question isn't whether Randolph Mercer is a perfect man, Carol said. The question is whether he's a man who, when he has to choose between what's easy and what's right, makes the right choice. She looked at Dale. And what you told me about his father, and about your father, and about what Randolph has done with that, I think we have a reasonable amount of evidence. 3 days later, Dale called Howard Finch. They talked for an hour. Dale told Howard everything, about his father, about the seed, about the Nashville company, and Mercer's response. Howard was quiet for a long time after. That's a lot to sit with, Howard said finally. Yeah, another pause. You think he means it? About what he wants this to mean when he's gone. I think he means it more than he means most things, Dale said. I think he's a complicated man who has had 60 years to figure out what he actually values, and has lately been arriving at some conclusions. Howard made a sound that was not quite a laugh. That's the most generous description of Randolph Mercer I've ever heard. My wife deserves credit for most of it. Howard was quiet again, and then he said, I'll think about the cooperative. In the second week of June, Preston Lyle came to Dale's property. He drove up the farm road in his truck and got out slowly, with the deliberate movements of a man who has decided to say something he's been resisting saying. He was carrying a paper bag that turned out to contain a bottle of bourbon, a gesture Dale recognized as the rural Tennessee equivalent of a white flag. They sat on the porch. I want to tell you something, Preston said. Something I should have told you straight instead of coming at it sideways. Dale waited. The reason I've been warning you about Mercer, Preston said, is that 2 years ago, I went to him for help. Similar situation to yours. Not as bad, but bad enough. I needed equipment access for a season, and I didn't have the capital. He paused. I didn't go to him the way you went to him. I went to him adversarially. I told him I knew he'd been looking at buying the Carver property and that if he didn't give me equipment access at below market rate, I'd make noise about his business practices at the county board level. Dale looked at him. I basically tried to blackmail him, Preston said flatly. He told me no, walked me off his property, and was entirely correct to do so. He looked out at Dale's field. He's not a bad man. I am the reason I don't trust him, because I came to him badly, and he saw me clearly, and I have been uncomfortable about that ever since. The sun was low and the fields were turning gold in the late afternoon light. The soybeans in the east section were visible from the porch. Small, steady, growing. You're telling me this because of the cooperative, Dale said. I'm telling you this because I've been in your way and I shouldn't have been. Preston picked up the bourbon bottle and turned it in his hands without opening it. I don't know if the cooperative is right for my operation, but that's my decision to make on the merits, not based on my personal grievances. He paused. I've been making it your problem, and that wasn't fair. Dale looked at his neighbor, at the lines in his face, at the hands that had worked land for 30 years, at the uncomfortable posture of a proud man sitting with his own behavior. I appreciate you saying that, Dale said. Preston nodded once, set the bourbon on the porch railing between them, and they sat in silence for a while in the way that neighbors who have known each other for a long time can sit. The summer moved the way Tennessee summers do, in long, heavy waves of heat punctuated by afternoon thunderstorms that rolled in from the west with spectacular speed and soaked the earth and were gone again within an hour, leaving the air washed and the soil dark and steaming. Dale's soybeans grew. Not perfectly. The germination gaps were visible, the uneven stands in the heavier clay sections reminding him constantly that he was working with compromised material. But they grew with a stubborn, focused energy that Dale found himself checking on every morning, the way you check on something you've placed a specific hope in. Marcus had become indispensable. The transformation was not dramatic. There was no single moment of revelation, no speech, no tearful acknowledgement. It happened the way most real things happen, gradually, and then suddenly. Marcus was in the field at 6 every morning. He'd ordered 2 agricultural management books online and was reading them with the same quiet intensity he'd applied to everything he'd ever decided mattered. He had conversations with Dale about soil biology and crop rotation that Dale had never had with his own father. Not because his father hadn't known these things, but because Dale himself hadn't been ready to listen until now. I think I want to stay, Marcus said one evening in July. They were in the barn doing equipment maintenance, and the statement emerged from a stretch of working silence so naturally that it took Dale a moment to register it. On the farm? Yeah. Marcus kept working, his eyes on the part he was adjusting. I know it's not, he paused. I know the economics. I know what it costs. I spent 2 years trying to find something else, and I kept coming back to this in my head. He looked up. I think this is the thing I know how to do. Dale set down his wrench. Then we build it for 2 people, he said. We've been farming this like it's one man's operation with a bad year. It's not. It's 42 acres with a drainage problem and 3 years of soil depletion. And it can carry 2 people if we fix it properly. Marcus looked at him. Something in his face settled, not relaxed exactly, but resolved. Like a decision had been made, and the uncertainty that goes before a decision had cleared. Okay, he said. Dale signed the cooperative agreement in August, 3 weeks before harvest. He was the first. Howard Finch signed 2 days later, grumbling in a way that was clearly performative at this point. Howard had made his decision weeks ago, and everyone knew it. 2 other farmers in the western county signed by the end of the week. Mercer organized a meeting at his property for all 4 participating farmers. It was a practical meeting, schedules, storage logistics, the shared equipment calendar for fall. But at the end of it, standing in Mercer's barn, with the late August light coming through the high windows and falling in long yellow bars across the concrete floor, something passed between the 5 men. Mercer, Dale, Howard, and 2 farmers Dale was still getting to know. That was more than business. It was the particular feeling of people who have decided to do something together. The harvest was in September. Dale and Marcus worked it with a rented combine, part of the cooperative's shared equipment pool, which they'd used at significantly below market rates over 4 days of cool, clear weather that felt like a gift from a sky that had been withholding gifts for 3 years. The yield was not exceptional. He knew it wouldn't be. The culled seed, the drought-depleted soil, the recovery year, none of it was going to produce the numbers of a normal year on healthy ground. When the final numbers came in, he stood in the kitchen with Carol and Marcus and looked at them. Better than break-even. Significantly better than the last 3 years. Not enough to clear the bank debt in 1 season, but enough to restructure it, enough to put the farm on a timeline that, with the cooperative savings on inputs and storage, was survivable. "We're going to be okay," Carol said. It was not a dramatic statement. She said it the way she said most things, directly, without fanfare. But Dale felt it go through him like something physical. He drove out to Beverly's in Baxter County on a Sunday in October, when the leaves were at their fullest color, and the hills along the interstate were burning red and orange and yellow against the gray sky. He sat with his mother at her kitchen table and told her everything. About Mercer, about the seed and the cooperative, about Marcus deciding to stay, about Preston Lyle on the porch with his bourbon. Beverly listened without interrupting. She had the same quality his father had had. The quality of people who make you feel that what you're saying is the only thing in the world that needs saying right now. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "Your father would be very happy," she said. "About the farm? About Marcus?" She smiled, the small, precise smile that Dale had known his whole life. Glenn always said the only thing that matters more than the first generation building a thing is the second generation choosing to continue it. Dale looked out the window. The oak tree in Beverly's yard was fully turned, every leaf a deep burnished red, and the light through it was amber and extraordinary. "Dad never asked for anything back from Mercer," he said. "No, he just gave it. He just gave it." Beverly wrapped her hands around her coffee mug. "That's how it works, Dale. You give a thing freely, and sometimes, not always, not even usually, it comes back around. Not to you necessarily, sometimes it comes back to your son." She looked at him. "And sometimes it comes back in the form of a seed." On a Tuesday morning in November, after the harvest was in, and the fields were turned, and the account at First Caldwell Bank had been restructured to a payment schedule that was tight but manageable, Dale walked his rows. He did this every morning. Had done it for 30 years. Would do it for however many years remained. The fields were brown and quiet, the soil turned up in neat rows, resting now in the way fields rest through winter, drawing in, replenishing, preparing for what came next. His boots left prints in the soft earth as he walked. The air was cold and sharp, and the sky was the deep, saturated blue that only happens in Tennessee in November, when the humidity has finally left and the light takes on a clarity it doesn't have in summer. Marcus was in the barn doing equipment prep. Carol was inside. He could see the kitchen light on through the house windows. The 42 acres, the same 42 acres Glenn Hutchins had cried over in 1974, were silent and real around him. He thought about seeds. About how something that looks dead, called rejected, below the threshold of commercial viability, can still, in the right soil, at the right time, become something. He thought about his father giving away documents in 1972 to a man who didn't ask for them, and about the long, slow arc of that act traveling 50 years to reach him here on a November morning in a field that was going to be all right. He bent down at the end of a row and pressed his fingers into the soil. It was cold and dark and smelled of iron and winter and the faint, specific promise of everything that would come up out of it in spring. He stood up. He walked back toward the house. The following April, Dale and Marcus expanded the tile drainage system Marcus had identified in the lower field, recovering 6.5 acres of previously unreliable ground. Howard Finch joined Dale in a direct conversation with Mercer about cooperative governance of formal growers, council with voting representation from all participating farms, which Mercer agreed to without extended negotiation. Preston Lyle joined the cooperative the following autumn. He never mentioned the bourbon. Carol's arthritis was managed more effectively after a specialist in Nashville adjusted her medication protocol that winter. She returned to the garden along the south wall of the house in March, working in the late morning light when her hands were warmest. Beverly Hutchins turned 80 that December. Dale drove out for the birthday. Marcus came too. They had dinner at the old farmhouse table where Glenn Hutchins had once sat, and afterward they looked at the land and did not need to say anything about it.